Today's podcast vlog focus is something that I've been thinking about for several years, technically, but especially lately with all the unfortunate things that have been happening in LA currently with ICE and the protests, and also thinking about the beauty of community coming together, rallying together, and supporting each other. And how does creativity tie in all of that? How can we, as visionary leaders, as creatives, as artists, even begin to take part? And there's so many ways that I can approach this and name. And as this is a creative challenge with no guidelines or planning or outline, I'm just jumping in here, stream of consciousness. There are different things that I would love to dive deeper into. So if there are areas of this that you're curious about or really resonate with, I'd love to hear from you and get into it more with more research and resources for you all and examples. But some things that come to mind are what I can talk best on are my personal experiences trying to explore this very notion and speak from those reflections and share that truth with you all. And of course, probably weaving in some things that I've heard or learned from peers or from my own learnings. But of course, to name that I am no way an expert in this, but I am deeply curious and passionate about finding ways to use what I know I am good at for good. And so, where this stems from in my personal story, thinking about how I can use art and my creative gifts as some way to help with the collective goal of liberation for all people, is probably when it definitely started much younger. There were things that I came to learn that really rubbed me the wrong way or made me kind of like curious or imagining different ways if history wasn't the way it went when I was young. But more clearly, this probably all came together when I became activated in college, when I joined the Filipinx American community, learned more about my cultural history, not just the history in the Philippines, but also the history of Filipinx Americans in America. And learning more about my culture through that lens with my peers within a community. And also through that, being able to see my parents not just as parents, but full humans with their own history and personal lived lives. And all of that is its own whole conversation. But with that experience, I was also a graphics and marketing coordinator for an on campus student center. And within that center, housed a handful of other organizations that represented different student groups, cultural backgrounds. And as a graphic designer and marketer, it was pretty much the starting point of what I do now, which I really appreciate being able to look back on those threads of my life that I've maintained and followed that curiosity and passion and interest, that it wasn't a waste and that it still makes sense and that it is can be a viable career that one gets paid for. And so, in that experience, I was able to help support these organizations that supported middle school students, high school students, and college students of different cultural backgrounds, non traditional backgrounds, and support their events, their workshops, their retreats, um, the important work that they were doing for their communities through design. Things like creating graphics and flyers to promote their events to increase engagement and enrollment, or actually designing the materials for the event themselves, like t-shirts and their posters, their merch, and other things like social media graphics or updating their websites to ensure that the right information would be sent out to their communities of hundreds of students. And so all of these things that I got to dip my toe into in college, along with designing wherever I could for the Filipinx American community through my 4 years in my campus, it really continued to show me and affirm that there are spaces for creatives to give back and support causes that we care about in really big ways. And when I think about design and branding and marketing and social media, in the grand scheme of the world and the history of humanity, it's not going to make the biggest, changes, let's say, as other certain fields. But if I were to just zoom in on this particular area that does so happen to exist and that I found myself into, it can make huge waves and changes in terms of bringing attention to certain movements or to organizations that deserve to be lifted up and recognized for important work that they're doing for their communities, or the events that they're throwing on, or the healing spaces that they offer and facilitate, and so on. And I think about design and branding for advocacy, for impact, for good, and it goes across so many different places, from grassroots movements, mutual aid, nonprofits, um, you know, policies, like everything. Art art movements on the ground, like on your own passion projects, education, um, like branding and design can be so powerful in terms of getting an important message or movement out there and getting eyes on it, or getting the funding that it deserves to keep that momentum going and to actually make a larger impact if it can get the attention of folks and get them understanding what you're doing as well, and getting that message across clearly, getting the excitement and the people, the numbers to grow, because together it really makes a difference. And if I think about what's happening in LA currently, where a lot of my friends and loved ones live and where I often visit, and I've grown up in California my whole life. And so just knowing that there's so much community organizing and unity coming together across different ages and cultural backgrounds and socioeconomic classes, like all of these people coming together to take a stand and support those who are being affected by what's happening is moving. And clearly there's so much organizing behind the scenes that we're not seeing. And when I was in the Filipinx American community, a lot of my friends and peers who were doing a lot of that organizing, behind the scenes work, is not recognized. People don't understand what goes behind the scenes. Late nights, lack of sleep, putting their bodies on the line. Like, we see these headlines of what's happening in LA, across the world, for other situations. And, of course, it's easy to repost an Instagram story and infographics, but we have to also remember that it's a bigger collective movement in different areas. And so much respect and admiration for those who are on the ground, putting their bodies on the line to make a statement and to support and protect those who are being affected, whether it's in LA or other movements. And so here I'm really talking and focusing more on, again, how creatives and artists and those who may not be sure about how they can support movements that they care about, if they're not one who is able to, or is someone who can get themselves to a protest or participate in person or gets into policy and all of those things. And that's something that I was traversing and figuring out as well during this time, uh, because so many of my friends and peers were more in that space. And there was always a part of me that felt like I wasn't doing enough, or that I wasn't good enough, or that I had still so much to learn. And I just didn't realize at the time that my focus and my gifts and what I'm good at could be better served at my 100% in other ways in what I am good at. And I can show my support and admiration for all areas of those who are contributing in their unique roles towards collective liberation. So, how can we continue to use our gifts as creatives and artists to help different movements that we care about? And I think about all the ways that in history, art and design and branding have been used in huge social movements. I think about my time in my screen printing class in college, where I learned about how, specifically because the teacher and the department it was taught through was through Chicanic studies, and to see the different screen print posters for protests and to share messages and movements um, for that particular cultural group was moving and empowering, and to know that something that can be um, DIY, using your hands with materials that could be shared, um, and can be really scrappy, and to pass those kind of posters around with important messages at protests or what have you, was incredible to see how artistry comes together with messaging, with protest, with advertising, with movements. I also think about how traditional advertising has been used, and how can folks use the tools of design and branding to then brand movements in very recognizable, powerful ways to come together to have this brand recognition for a movement, for example, like Black Lives Matter or Stop API Hate, or other movements that have been branded in recent times. And, there's so much research that can be done to bring up historical movements in the past. Like, I think about Yellow Peril supporting the Black Panthers, and the imagery and the iconography and the colors and the photos that were associated with that time is still so powerful today. And so there's so much in terms of visuals that can really help people rally together for a common cause and create a sense of inspiration and empowerment and connection to something that they can recognize easily, immediately, that if it was on merch or t-shirts or a bumper sticker, that you can create a sense of safety or or camaraderie in an instant. And there's so much around, again, artistry and creativity that you can do to contribute to movements that you care about in really big and small ways, depending on, again, what you are able to do. And I also think about those who are in the wellness spaces, who are spiritual guides and energy healers. That's also a huge aspect of work and resources that a lot of folks are in need of. So, how do we take care of ourselves and the community through our really powerful, potent gifts in these ways, to ensure that these movements that we want to continue supporting and hopefully, one day no longer need, but how do we continue supporting these movements with the momentum and sustainability they deserve? And there's so many ways to that. For example, I think about iconic Black feminist writers and womanist writers who wrote articles and poetry that moved people, kind of like a soothing balm for tired activists and organizers, or those who create music to help lift up spirits, create rallying lyrics for protests or after protests, or those who are in culinary spaces to nourish those in need of a good meal. This can go on, but there's so many facets of support and life and creativity and wellness and care that can be done and contributed. And instead of feeling this despair and this hopelessness, which institutions want us to feel so that we feel like we can't do anything and we freeze out of fear, but rather how do we spin that? And not to say to bypass our emotions, of course, move through them, get the support we need, but also create this sense of resilience within us to support each other as a community, to come together, to lean on each other, and know that we all have our own different gifts and capacities that we can contribute so that when one gets tired, the other can step in and so on to fill in the gaps. And this is something that I continue exploring and figuring out in my own way, and the way that my support for activism has evolved over the years. Sometimes it's more in your face, visual, bigger projects. Other times it's behind the scenes and it's supporting in ways that the public doesn't see. And so it's okay to take that time to figure it out, and to learn and to actually connect with communities. And it's something that I continue to learn and face with one of my freelance clients and supporting them as they are deeply involved with all of this, all of these themes and topics. And so this is kind of like that behind the scenes work that is happening in this season of my life, because I am supporting in through design and branding and social media and marketing, but that doesn't get seen, or noticed. But I do feel this great sense of fulfillment, knowing that I can help support directly with an organization that is making a local impact. And so, are there ways that you, as a visionary, as a creative, as an artist, as a healer, as a guide, to get creative in thinking about what it is that lights you up and what is it that fires you up, and where is that intersection to bridge together the causes that you care about and the things that you're good at? What kind of incredible vehicle can you create to move that all together and bring to light? And maybe you're not creating your own thing, but how can you then also see, are there organizations or movements or spaces that you can help contribute to? And this is a lot of exploration and internal reflection to figure that out. And hopefully, remembering that we're not here to do this stuff alone. It can be really easy to doom scroll. It can be really easy to not know what to do. And so it's important to find a community, even if it is one other person, to talk things out, to know that you're not alone and that there are ways to support in our own way, in our own small or big ways. None of these efforts, these learnings, these explorations that we're doing is going to waste, because there is good at the heart of all of it. And it can, again, feel really difficult when it seems like there is fear. There is a lot of fear being thrown around, and misinformation and harm. And what's so powerful is when we can come together as a community to know that we are united, that we want and are working towards a new way of moving in society, that it is possible because we can dream it up. And so there's so much here still that still being articulated, that I'm still reflecting on, that I'm probably sharing some half baked ideas. But these are some things that have been on my mind lately. And hopefully this gives you food for thought. And I'd love to hear from you of what's resonating, what you're curious about exploring as well. And if you even have thoughts about or questions on how you might be able to, um, you know, bring forth your own gifts and skills and talents. Like, if you're curious about how to even do that, I'd love to chat with you in the DMs or the comments and just continue this conversation. But until next time, thank you.